Hi, friend.
Hi, friend.
And to the brave hearts listening out there, welcome to Permission to be Human. I'm Andrea.
And I'm Janelle.
Get ready for some real-time relationship woo and wisdom
From the front lines with occasional tantrums and tears.
about how breaking rules, blurring boundaries, and tossing tradition can be catalysts for finding your truth.
Let's debunk the fairy tales we were told as children and create a new map for life.
Yes, Disney can go fuck itself.
If you're seeking permission to choose your own path
Freedom is the new F word, people.
and want to feel less alone along the way,
We got you. Please note, this is our side of the story. Our partners and metamors have their own individual experiences, and we do not speak for them. Hi, friend.
Hi, friend. How should I say? My elfin sister.
Yes, we are elfin sisters today. We both showed up in the same shirt.
That feels like so high school. And I loved it. When I saw you walk in, I was like, oh my God, this is so fun.
Yeah, you saw me coming outside, right? And you're
Yeah.
like, look at this. It's very organic. We are matching. And so we have chosen spirit crowns that complement and also are a little matchy-matchy.
Little matchy.
Too.
And I feel a little bit like an elf in mine, which is, of course, like, oh, that's a funny thing. I never think about elves.
So
Here we
we're
are.
elfin sisters today.
Mhm.
And perfectly timed, we're going to talk a little bit about woo.
Yeah, that's what we're going to do.
All the woo that's crazy and true.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to get Janelle's flavor of woo today. Are you ready to do some woo?
I am.
All right. So let's begin. What's woo to you? What does the word even mean to you?
The word brings like a lightness and like a fairy like sprinkle to what I would actually say has become like my way of relating to spirituality. Quite different than the Catholic Church way that I was raised.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
No fairies in the Catholic.
Mm-hmm. So you said it's your way of relating to spirituality. So it's what makes you spiritual.
I would say it has been a path towards my spirituality.
Okay. It's a little clearer. So you feel spiritual, and it has different flavors of woo have been vehicles on the path towards spirituality.
Yes. And woo can be lots of different things, right? There is psychics.
Mm-hmm.
There are intuitive masseuses.
Mm-hmm.
There are astrology readings. There's like a human design or a gene keys.
Mm-hmm. I just asked you about tuning forks the other day.
Yes. You asked me about tuning forks.
I think I'm going to do that. Yeah.
There's sound baths. So there's so many things that are out there. And in my experience now, I could say that I think they all are leading us to the same place, which I would describe as love
Mm,
in my heart.
interesting.
They're leading me inwards, and they all have love at the center.
Mm-hmm. Would you liken this, go out on a limb here, to different, I think of different religions as all spokes toward a center of kindness, human connection, and love
Yes.
as well.
Yep. And each one has its own flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And at different points in my life,
Mm-hmm.
some of them resonate with me because of the point of life that I'm in. And then at other times, like just some are just not, they're just never going to call to me. And I don't know why that is. Like I can't explain the resonance that happens with some versus another. But that's just like what resonates for you. Like you're like, oh, I might want to do a tuning fork. And I've actually have been exposed to tuning forks, but it hasn't been something that I'm like wanting to dive more deeply into, right? But you're like, oh, you were exposed to it. You're like, oh, something about that resonates with me. I'd like to dive a little bit more deeply into it. So it's essentially the key is listening to like, oh, what feels true? Not that your woo is better than my woo or that woo is better than this woo. It's, oh, that one piqued my interest. Let me take a few steps down towards that.
Okay. That makes a lot of sense. There is no right or wrong or good or bad or more or less.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever speaks to you is your flavor of woo.
Right.
And why did you want to talk about this today? What message is most important for you to share?
I think the fact that I did not grow up believing in woo. I grew up Catholic. And even though I didn't really resonate with Catholicism, starting in, early in my early teens, I knew I wasn't spiritually challenged. I had not gotten married. I didn't have kids. I wasn't asked the question what do you believe and why? I wasn't a seeker of trying to understand my place in the universe or why I was here. These were not questions I was asking. So I was aware that there was something that was like percolating around me, but I wasn't like in the middle of it. But if you had asked me, I know I don't believe in Catholicism, like that's not resonating, but would you go see a psychic? No way. That was a no. Like that, I was like, that's like make believe, like woo.
Yeah.
That I just couldn't relate
Felt
to.
fake to you. Is that right?
Yeah. It was like the psychic you pay $5 to, and then they're just like making something up or saying something super generic. Or any like astrology reading that you read in the newspaper, right? Every day it's like, here's what your birth sign is, here's the Aries. But then you could read it and anyone could find something. It's so generic.
Yeah. So what changed your mind? And really the original question was, why do you want to share it today?
I want to share it because it's ultimately changed my life by me being open-minded to something I was closed-minded to before.
Got it. And is it never too late to get into woo?
Never too late. I mean, I would say I started at 41.
Okay. So what changed your mind?
Well, one thing I have figured out is that I have very close relationships and that there are people, like my friends in my life, who have a big impact on me. And you being one of them, right? Where suddenly I'm like, oh, this person is in my life and I'm resonating with them and laughing with them. Laughter is being a key part of that. And then if you're really interested in something, then it's almost like I can bypass any like research or referrals. It's like, there's a trust here that I can at least go down that path. I had started dating my boyfriend at the time, and I was traveling, and he and his sister have seen psychics or intuitive masseuses at different times. And he's like, I really think you would benefit from seeing this person. And I was like, okay.
You're open.
I was open.
Curious.
So he set up an appointment with me to have a meeting with her.
And what did you go in looking for? Were you going in looking for answers to a question?
No. But I was definitely going in with curiosity. Like, okay, like I'm open to seeing what she has to say. I will say I was traveling at the time, like trying to like find myself, if you will. So I was curious to see if there was something like there in that realm.
Okay.
So while I definitely didn't believe in psychics growing up, the first experience that piqued my interest deeply was actually my cousin was relating a story to me where my mom had already passed away and my cousin was going to see a psychic, and she reported back that she went and the psychic said to her, oh, your sister's here. Like a spirit had showed up. And she was like, oh, that's weird. I do have sisters, but they're alive. She's like, and the psychic like said a couple of other things. And then she goes, oh, do you mean my aunt who was a nun, AKA a sister? And she was like, yes. And that experience, there was some information that my mom shared in this, like from this like spirit world that was true, that made us like the family go, okay, maybe there's something to this psychic business. So that happened, and I still didn't go see a psychic.
Okay. I think that's a good story to relay. And it's actually perfect because I'm like, nope, super suspicious.
Yeah.
Don't believe fucking any of that. I think it is such a load of crap, which is perfect because I get it. Also, there have been times when I did believe, but I'm like, nope, people want to believe. And the fact that she said sister, you're like, oh, do you mean my aunt? Oh yeah, I mean that. That's who I mean. But this spoke to you and it sounded like it led you to other experiences. So
Yeah,
let's
at
keep
least
going. I love it.
Yeah, it put a little like something in my back pocket that I was like, okay, I'm gonna like hold on to that.
Great.
The next one was that I saw my first intuitive masseuse. And what that means is, and this is, I think, great for anyone who's like trying to figure this out, is you're lying on the table,
Yeah.
getting a massage. She was actually a rolfer. It's like with her elbow, like deep tissue massage. And while touching you, she's channeling spirits.
Okay.
So the worst case is you get a massage.
I love this one. Right. Such a bonus. She's in my neighborhood. I went to her too.
Yes.
Zoe. Yeah.
And I'll say for that one, that first time on the table, I remember being open and curious. And she shared a whole bunch of things. And while I remember being like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to believe, what I do remember was the feeling in my body was that this felt like more true and resonant than anything I'd ever felt sitting at a pew in church.
Love that comparison. And that's a bodily feeling.
Right.
Not in your head.
Not in my mind. Because in my mind was like, I'm not sure what I'm supposed to believe here. Is this true? I'm like, I didn't know what was going on that way, but I knew in my body was like, oh, I feel really comfortable here.
I think that's a great point.
Mm-hmm.
A high degree of comfort in the arms of this person with her hands on you.
Yeah. The comfort coming in my body, right? I let my mind go and and I was just listening to my body. My body was like, no, like prickly needles of like, what, this is weird. What's happening? It was like, no, this feels good.
Do you think that was also your ability to surrender? No.
I don't even think I knew that word then.
Even then.
Right?
Okay. Mm-hmm.
Like this is my
early.
first foray into
yeah,
before any spiritual awakening,
okay,
before any
early.
conscious culture, before any like feminine leadership, before women's circles.
Okay.
This
so
was
it's early.
Very early.
Okay. So you felt comfortable.
Mm-hmm. What I ended up doing with that particular person is that I saw her 2 to 3 times a year for the next 7 years. I saw her.
Wow.
A lot.
That's a lot. Yeah.
And the big takeaway was that it felt like she affirmed what I was feeling in life, whatever was going on. And so whereas there's some like new revelations sometimes, and sometimes they were actually relevant. And sometimes I was like, I'm not sure. This one feels like it's a little bit out in left field.
Mm-hmm.
But for the most part, what I always walked away was, oh, like there's a resonance here again. There's some truth here. And it would give me things to think about.
Mm-hmm. So Janelle, it seems like you've had several of these experiences. Let's just say the intuitive masseuse at this point. How do you know when to go in? When you do get the information, what do you do with it? How long does it last? What does that process look like? Can you give me an example?
Sure. So the first thing I did was I would leave a session. And then instead of like going into my car, I would sit down in the lobby and just type on my phone everything I could remember of what she said. And in this way, it was something I could like refer back to and read again, time over time. I would also often just like contemplate what it is that she said.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't that I was going, like I said, I was going 2 to 3 times a year. So it wasn't like I was like, okay, like here's information and now I'm going to go do something with that and then go to the next thing. It was like, oh, I would sit with it, think about it, talk about it.
Externally process
about it.
Tell me about it. Yeah.
And then just like feel how it was in my system.
Mm-hmm.
And then sometimes I would take action. I will say, I had obviously developed some trust with her over time.
Mm-hmm.
So this wasn't like, I didn't take action on anything she said the first time that I met her. But there's one specific time that I remember where I had spoken to my dad. My dad was in his mid-80s at the time. My aunt was in her late 80s and was still living alone. And we had gotten to the point where we realized like she needed more assistance. but she was adamant about having someone live with her. And my dad was like, I think maybe she should live with me. And I was like, no way, Dad. Like, it makes no sense. And, Aunt Dot's 89, you're 84. Like, your house isn't set up for it. You're not set up for it. Like, this would just be like, it would just crimp your lifestyle and the way that you have it. Like, not a good idea. And I said it that directly. And I felt my dad recoil.
Mm-hmm.
Not because he like really wanted Aunt Dot to live with him, but because he recognized we needed to do something.
Yeah.
And we didn't know what else to do. But I was like, you can't do that. So I happened to go see Zoe. And in that session, the intuitive masseuse. And in that session, and in each of these sessions that I saw her, like oftentimes like spirits would come in. Like my mom did start to come in and I had experiences with her.
Mm-hmm.
And in this one, she's like, your mom's here. I was like, okay. And she was like, your aunt cannot live with your dad. That is a hard no. And I was like, I know. And I had a dialogue. I was like, I know. What am I supposed to do? And she didn't tell me what to do, but I just said that out loud.
Mm-hmm.
But I can see, like, I have this big vision of my mom being like, no way. This does not be good for your dad. And I left the session, sat down in that lobby, started taking notes, and was like, oh my gosh, I just need to give my dad another solution. Like, my dad is not a creative problem solver. He's a doer.
Uh-huh.
And we had just assumed that the assisted living facilities were not available. And so I came out of the session, went home, sat at my table, called every assisted living facility within a half a mile of where she lived,
Mm-hmm.
and found a place that was available 2 weeks later.
Mm-hmm. Called
My dad, and he was like, great, set up an appointment, went the next day, and then talked to Aunt Dot, and she ended up moving in those 2 weeks.
Okay, so let's stop there. What I'm hearing is that the intuitive massage session with Zoe facilitated your problem solving and your aha moments.
Mm-hmm.
It helped something come through for you, not during the session, but afterward.
But immediately afterwards.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That I was able to take action on, that it actually like impacted my life.
Just like moving something through your body.
Yes. Yeah. And it was in this way, it was my mom, like it was like my mom and I having a conversation. Like we're both in agreement.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And it helped me go, oh, what's my role? Me yelling at my dad, saying, no, you can't do this, doesn't work. If I give him the options, then it will. And so like, could I have come up with that idea on my own? Potentially, but I hadn't.
Mm-hmm.
And it really felt that this expedited the whole thing with ease.
Okay. That's a great example. So do you feel like you went in with knowing you were going to solve that issue?
Not at all.
Not at all.
I'm not even sure that I
time.
even knew. I usually, like I had in this particular, like every time I went in, there was a rotating thing of like, I would talk about me, I would talk about my relationship, I would talk about my life in terms of work. Then we would touch on my dad. Typically we would touch on my stepson, my partner, there was people that I was like rotating through.
Sure.
But it was I never went in with, here's what I'm seeking, like an answer to. It was like, here's what's going on in my life. And then let's see what gets reflected back to me.
Do you think it's tapping into the subconscious or unconscious?
No. What I feel like it's doing is that it's tapping in. Like she would really say, oh, tell me who's here. Oh, your mom's here. Oh, a woman's here who you knew. And like, I might not always know the person. I remember one time and I was like, oh, is mom here? And she's like, no. And she's like, I think she's at an art class.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, oh my God, yeah. My mom loved to paint, watercolor. And so it seemed really like I loved this vision. And Zoe didn't know that.
Right.
And I was like, I just love this vision that my mom was not putting me first in this moment. She was like, no, my art class is happening. I'm doing this right now. You're fine.
Nice.
So in a way, this relationship also connected me to my mom in a way that I never thought was possible. And that has continued to deepen my relationship with the spirit world.
So this is a repeat situation for you. You go 2 to 3 times a year still. Is that right?
I haven't now in a year. I think I might be done, but because I found others now at this point.
Mm-hmm. Do you want to talk about another form of woo that you go into? This seems like the biggest one maybe for you.
This one was big at the time because it was my first. It opened my mind, expanded me. And then
it's your gateway.
It was your
gateway woo.
It was a gateway woo.
Yeah, it's totally true. Plus, she's like a masseuse, like that's super mainstream,
right?
To most people. She's in like Pearl Street, like
right.
There's nothing weird about Pearl Street.
It was always enjoyable.
Yeah. Okay. Great. What's the next one you want to talk about?
So the next one I want to talk about is a different type of modality, which is something called human design. And there's a ton of different like personality test type stuff out there. What it's helping you do is how to make decisions that are correct for yourself, for your authentic self,
for you,
not for your conditioned self.
That taps into the podcast point too.
Yep.
I don't think I've ever heard it described that way. That's human design.
Yes.
Got it.
And I was introduced to that by a friend. So there's 4 different types in human design. And it's one of those things, it's based on your birthday, your birth time, and your city of your birth.
Okay. So I just want to note that the difference in these 2 woos, Zoe, the intuitive masseuse, is going in and feeling your body.
And channeling something with the spirit world.
Correct. And human design is based on things you have absolutely no control over.
Correct.
Very different.
Yes.
Principles.
Yes.
Very different platforms.
Yes.
And yeah, there's such an initial suspicion of that for me.
Which one?
Of human design. Even though I have read it and gotten something from it. I'm like, this is completely arbitrary, right? So you're truly reliant on the mystical powers of the universe, of when they delivered you into this world and where you were delivered into this world.
Right.
Just want to point that out about human design.
Yes. And I got involved in this before I was not into astrology or the zodiac or Western astrology or.
Right.
And yes, part of my woo now is like recognizing that there are things that happen that I believe that are based on like the stars and the planets and this alignment and the neutrinos of these things that go into our cells when we're born. And it's this whole thing that I can't explain. And I think this is probably this is an important point, is that everything I'm talking about today isn't something that I can understand from my mind. It's all stuff that I've experienced from my body where I'm like, oh, this feels true for me. And if you're like, okay, Janelle, explain to me all the different things about human design, I'm going to be like, here's what I feel. I'm going to give you some words. It's going to not be very articulate, and I'm going to refer you to their website. But I can tell you that it means a lot to me. And this is what I've gotten out of it.
I love that. That's a great explanation. And I think it helps me understand how you're experiencing it. I like the repetition of that. It's a feeling you're having in your body. It's not about a linear understanding. There is no whiteboard. There is no flowchart. This is about what's inside.
Well, and I think it's more than in fact, human design, there's actually quite a few charts. But what it isn't doing is my mind is not trying to say, can I prove this?
Yeah, I get it.
I think that's the difference. And with human design, what ended up happening was there's 4 different types. And for those of you, just to give a quick overview, there's generators, and that's 70% of the population. There's projectors, and that's 9% of the population. There's manifestors, and that's 7% of the population. And then there are, and my math could be wrong, so I might have gotten one of those off.
That's okay.
And then there's reflectors, and they are 1% of the population.
Right.
And a friend of mine had done her human design, and she's like, oh my gosh, I'm a manifester. I'm really rare. This is the thing that happens. And then she plugged my numbers in, my birth date, time, blah, blah. And turns out I was a reflector. And she's like, oh my gosh, you're the rarest of it, 1%. And I've done tons of personality tests. And there was just something that was like, oh, like if I'm supposed to be rare, if this thing says I'm rare, then I'm curious about that. Like, And that is simply enough was like piqued my interest.
Got it.
Then, so I dug a little deeper. And in my case, what it talks about, again, this is how you make correct decisions. It says one of your, like, it says, and the vocabulary is called not self, but what do you feel when you're not in it's an emotion that you can feel. And for reflectors, it's disappointment. For generator, it's frustration. For manifester, it's anger. And for a projector, it's bitterness. And when I read this about reflectors, I was like, oh, I'm probably not a reflector. I don't feel disappointment. And then maybe 12 hours later,
Yeah.
I had an experience where I was like, oh,
Yeah.
that emotion that I feel all of the time is actually called disappointment.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, that's so interesting because you're not the other three.
No, I'm not the other three. But what it taught me was that I experience lots of things in my body that I actually don't have words for, which also makes me curious of like, how do we as humans know what a feeling is and how to put a word to it? I actually realized in my adult life that there was a lot of feelings, disappointment and shame that I didn't think I experienced because I couldn't associate the feeling in my body to a word.
You talked about this in the last
And so
podcast.
human design was my access point to a vocabulary that matched an emotion.
Wow. That's a big turning point for you.
Yeah.
Because I believe you mentioned grief and anger last time when we were talking about our relationships.
Yeah.
We were like, I didn't know what to do with those. And so I didn't
know how to access them. But I felt like I knew what anger was, right?
Yeah, sure.
And I knew what grief was. But if you had asked me, oh, well, like, do you feel disappointment? I mean, I asked myself and I was like, no, I would have said no. But if you had asked me, do I feel anger? I said, oh yeah, but not very often, right? It's just not something that I really. But so disappointment was just like not even on the table.
Okay, so to clarify, by tapping into human design, you learned how to put words to your emotions?
And not wasn't even all of them. But again, there was another piece of human design, because this is about helping you make decisions that are correct for yourself, was that our reflector needs to wait at least a full lunar cycle, so essentially an entire month, before making a decision. I need to wait before making a decision in order to feel surprise versus disappointment. And it really helped me see how I could get very excited about something initially in life. And you see me do.
You do all the time. Yeah.
But that if I hear something about something for the first time and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm a yes, then I probably am going to change my mind maybe 30 seconds or maybe an hour or 2 days later. I have to like hear about it. I can get really excited about it, but now I know, oh yeah, I'm in my excitement phase. I'm going to wait. And if it sticks around, right, then I'll know when it's true.
Got it. So how has the continued use of human design helped you? And do you use it on a regular basis? Or was this your aha moment and you take a long time to integrate that particular point?
It's a pretty complex system. And so when I first heard this, I was like, oh, I'm intrigued. And the more I understood, the more intrigued I became and the more I learned about myself. So I did a deep dive for a couple of years where I saw different people. I had human design sessions.
Right.
And then I specifically went to like reflectors who were giving a session. And then I took a course and then I have books. So I went pretty far into it. So now I've essentially integrated it. So I don't access it all the time, but I just, it's readily available in my mind if I need it.
And from a logistical perspective, is human design best to just go get the book and go through it yourself? Or do you recommend someone goes and gets a session from an expert?
What I would say is just go to, I actually don't even know a website, but you can look up like, how do you get your human design chart? I think you can go to jovianarchive.com. And again, you do have to know your birth date and time.
Sure.
And then read it and see if it resonates with you. And if it resonates, then read a little bit more. There's tons of information online and on YouTube. And then if it resonates even more, then you could go to a session. Like I wouldn't pay for anything until you know if it resonates first. But I will say this is that it can be really helpful, especially if you have family, understanding your partner, understanding your kids, because like my partner now, he was able to understand like, oh, I'm not going to be able to make a decision right away. And
I need more time.
And he's as a generator, he could. And so it helps us understand each other better. And so I think in that way, it's also a very good communication tool, but not in the typical way we think of communication. We just understand each other better. And then same thing with your kids. Oh, if one of them is a projector and a projector needs to be invited before they can make a decision. And that like is a totally different way of interacting with someone. So I found it to be super useful. You can see if it resonates.
And I thought that the gene keys and human design are very interconnected. Are they not?
They are. Yes.
So should we segue into the gene keys?
Sure.
And
absolutely.
how do they fit together?
So human design is a synthesized system based on the I Ching, Western zodiac, chakras, Kabbalah, and hexagrams.
Woo!
So it's a very complex system.
There's a lot of words there.
Yes. And so, but it's all, and like one person kind of put all these things together. The gene keys is a system put together by Richard Rudd, which is a way, it's like a gentle path of transformation that is based on contemplation, compassion, and patience. And in this one, the gene keys, whereas human design is talking about how to make correct decisions, the gene keys is really talking about your life's purpose that's built into your DNA. So again, it's because it's still based on your date of birth, time, and location, but it talks about your life's purpose, your life's work, the challenge you're going to have in life, and your radiance, they call it, which is, like kind of how you really shine in the world. And in all of these systems, in human design and in gene keys, there's the subconscious part of you that is really like the true you, but you don't even see it. It's like other people can see it in you, but it's hard to see it in yourself. And then there's the conscious part of you, which is the part that we know of. And so that's the part we think, oh, this is who I am, without knowing the subconscious part. So it's a kind of this, like in the gene keys is really a slow, contemplative, like revealing, peeling the onion back, if you will, to get more of your subconscious to come to the surface so you can understand more like your true self.
Okay.
We're deep.
We're deep
in it.
Yeah, deep in it. And again, just a reminder to the bravehearts, like, why am I talking about this? It's not because I'm like, oh my gosh, human design is the best, intuitive masseuse, gene keys, like it's that there's 1,000 things out there. And this is the path that I took. And I want you to feel like, oh, you can discover your own path too.
Yeah, I think you said in the beginning, before we started, the goal is to talk about weird shit and invite the bravehearts to consider the weird shit.
Yes.
No matter what it is, no matter what it looks like.
Right.
Remember,
Not that I'm like, this is the weird shit you're supposed to believe in. I'm just saying like, hey, this is the weird shit that really resonated and helped me learn a lot about myself.
And I think this speaks also to if we can stop the judgment that we might have about any flavor of woo and instead be curious. It's like, oh no, that's not for me. It may not be for you, but it's worth picking it up, looking at it, turning it around, setting it back down, and contemplating it.
Yep.
And seeing what speaks to you, what's calling to you. And then making a decision that's right for you about that flavor of woo.
Yeah. And the gene keys, it's like, the book is like this thick, and he doesn't even talk because there's 64 different gene keys. And there's a shadow frequency, a gift frequency, and a city frequency in each one. But then there's also these lines. And the reason why I'm mentioning that is because I happen to be a 4-6 line. And the 6th line means that your life is divided up into 3 stages. And like the 3 stages are 0 to 20, 20 to 50, and then 50 and above. And when I said that the human design was like, oh, like I just like got to like understand myself. It gave me a vocabulary. Like the Gene Keys gave me like a whole like book. Oh, that's how I describe myself. Oh, that feels true for me. And my mantra that I sing every morning was inspired through some of the phrases that came through on my Gene Keys profile. And it really helped, again, put words to experiences that I didn't have words for.
Do you want to share your morning mantra right now?
Really?
You don't have to, but of course, I have heard it, and then you put it on LinkedIn, and it is very inspiring. And if you don't,
okay, right, because a mantra is a form of woo, and it actually ties in. Actually, I'm gonna leave the Bravehearts in suspense. I am gonna sing it, but I'm gonna wait till a little bit later after I talk about how it kind of came through. Some kind of came with the other one, but yes,
love it.
And so between human design and the Gene Keys, it was just a lot of vocabulary that resonated, and in some ways, like problem solving. It's like, because I know what your Gene Keys are. I know all my friends' Gene Keys.
Yeah.
And I'm like, it helps me again understand the people that I love. And it gives me flavors of them. And like, oh, I see this in you. And again, it's not like, oh, like all of us are at choice. All of us are at will, even if we're born on whatever time and whatever day. And we're always in choice. And yet there are things that feel like nature put it in us. That express a certain way. And the more, from my experience, the more I've understood those parts of me, the more comfortable I've become.
That's key. The more comfortable you've become. Would you say with yourself?
Yeah. Yes. But the more I have become myself.
That's beautiful. What I'm hearing for the first time as we go over this is, as you know, Janelle, you and I have talked endlessly about these different types of experiences you've had. But I'm hearing that there's 2 parts. There's this structure, which feels linear almost, because it's giving categories, it's giving layers, it's giving labels, which feels very linear. But then I also hear you say that you're feeling these experiences in your body. Yes. And so that is really 2 silos that are blending together. And I like that. I like the idea of both those. I think that's all I'm saying. I'm just taking that in and being like, okay, this is both the unstructured bodily feeling and the structured labeled vocabulary. Yeah, that's beautiful. I think that's accurate. Okay. So the next one I love to talk about is this, like a psychic now. Just a basic psychic. Yeah. It feels so very vanilla compared to we haven't even gotten into like the deep woo. Right. Are you going to talk about the Indian palm? Yeah, but that's coming. Oh, that's later. Okay. Yeah. So the psychic, I'm just picturing like the only thing I have in my mind for a psychic is this window with this neon palm in it that we would drive by in Illinois, and I would always want to stop there and have mentioned it a couple of times. And my mom, I knew my mom would be like, of course we're not doing that. What are you, crazy? Like, that's just ridiculous. Right, it's a scam. It's a waste of money. But that is, when you say the word psychic, I picture this little house with a little neon and maybe some prayer flags. Yep. So they've branded themselves pretty consistently across. I guess they have. At least across the US. It's always in movies. Yeah. So tell me how far it's come from that. Or is it the same basic idea in my head? Go ahead. No. So this again, someone referred to me, the psychic that they thought was really great. And I was like, okay, I feel ready. I want to do it. So she gave me the phone number, and there was no interaction. There was no like website. It was just like, what time can you see me?
Here's what my offerings look like.
Mhm.
And I said, okay, I'll do the hour-long session and I'll pay the extra 15 minutes for the energetic clearing. So an hour and 15 minutes, 100 and whatever it was, $50. And
Janelle loves a good energetic clearing. She's always getting that for dessert at brunch. So not surprised that you went for that.
Yeah.
I love it. Keep going.
And so then she's like, okay, in the calendar invite, it's like, okay, she's going to call me on a certain time. So there is no house. This is only over the phone.
Zoom.
I have no idea.
Zoom?
No Zoom.
Oh my gosh.
Phone call. So I have no idea what she looks like. She has no idea what I look like.
Okay.
And in the calendar invite, all you're doing is giving your name, like your first name.
Mm.
And so she gets on the phone. She's like, okay, so how I like to start is say your name 3 times. I think that's all it is. I think it was like literally that. And so you say your name, I say my name 3 times. And then she just starts talking and like telling me what she sees. And I do have the opportunity for questions.
Mm.
But in this case, the first time I went to see her, or to quote unquote see her, the first time I spoke to her, she was basically like, you need to work on opening your throat chakra. Like I feel that it's blocked. And here's ways you can do that.
Hmm.
And one is to journal. Another one is to massage your throat.
Hmm.
Another one is to sing. And I remember when she said sing, I was like, I don't sing. But I, again, took it to heart, like integrated what she said and really appreciated I didn't have a lot of experience. I don't have that much experience with other psychics, but I really appreciated the concrete to-do list to open the thing that she said I needed to do. And after seeing her, I ended up going on an ayahuasca journey. And on that one, I was like, the ayahuasca is one that told me was like, basically, Adele and Beyonce took singing lessons.
Yeah. You're like, well, I can too then.
Well, I can
Talk
too
about
then.
a permission slip.
Right.
You were given a permission slip.
Right. So the psychic and then ayahuasca. And then I was like, oh, and I have a friend who gives singing lessons. Okay, so I'm going to call her.
Kathleen,
lady. Yay to Lady and to Running Wild, which is our theme song.
Mm-hmm.
So I called her up and I said, hey, can I take lessons? And she gives like 3 package lessons. And I took them. And it was like a very like action oriented step from what the psychic was saying. And part of the thing that came through was one that I realized that I was the only person who told myself my entire life that I couldn't sing.
Exactly. This was a limitation you put on yourself.
Yep. Like I told myself this 1,000 million times in my lifetime. But I realized I had never actually sung in front of anyone ever.
Mm.
And then Kathleen in like the second session was like, well, have you ever written a song? And I was like, no, I haven't written a song. I don't sing. And she was like, well, I like to have people do this. And then they can sing it every morning or they can sing it. And so was like, okay. And then I wrote this mantra, which ended up being really a summary of words from the Gene Keys and Human Design that had resonated with me as I had done all of this stuff.
Love it when a plan comes together.
Yeah. And so now I'm going to sing to you. So this is like another flavor of the woo. The mantra that I wrote as a result of my singing lessons with Kathleen that came from a psychic telling me to do this, that I have sung every morning now for like 2.5 years.
At least.
Yeah. Okay.
2.5 years.
Yeah. Here we
Every
go.
morning.
Every morning.
You ready? You ready, Bravehearts? Here she goes. Here she goes. Get ready.
I will be okay no matter what. By being present, I hold on to life lightly. I embrace impermanence. I surrender to what is. I trust in the divine. I am a vessel of love. Woohoo! I am a vessel of love. Yeehaw! I am a vessel of love. All this and even better.
Yay! So good, my friend. I'm so proud of you.
Oh my gosh.
That is beautiful. Wow. I mean, people should come on just to hear you sing that and be inspired to create their own song that they sing every morning.
Yeah.
That's
While I'm drinking my cacao. Mhm.
while you're drinking your cacao.
Yeah. Yeah. So this is just to kind of put it back into like it's like solid form, right? Here's something that's very woo. Here's going to see a psychic.
Mhm.
And then here, a very tangible result of going to see that psychic is that I took singing lessons, wrote a mantra, and sing myself an uplifting song every morning that impacts me and people around me and my life. And so in this way, I'm like, oh yeah, like this is a spiritual, like, I don't know, like it's just like it's moving through me.
It's working for you. And you didn't even mention that you joined a choir.
And I joined a choir as a result, also because like the psychic said, and I knew, and I will say, like I did all of this, and it was almost 11 months when I had a moment after 11 months after I'd seen the psychic, lessons, mantra, joining the choir, where I had a moment where it was like, I actually like asked for what I wanted in some instance. And it was like bells kind of went off. And I was like, oh, I just opened my throat chakra.
Whoa.
It was a very clear moment. And throughout the year, I had been wondering if I should see her again. And I was like, no, I haven't, like, I just knew I hadn't opened it yet. Like, I didn't know what it was supposed to feel like or do or whatever, but I was like, I just know that I'm still working. I'm still integrating what she told me. So after that happened, I was like, oh, I can see her again. So I scheduled a session with her. So this is now a year later. And I told her, I was like, oh, like, I'm ready to see you again. Like, I know that I basically checked off the list of what I was supposed to do. And so she was like, okay. She's like, great. She's like, I love that you waited. Not everybody does. And then she's like, oh, I can see, like about 6 weeks ago, she's like, I see what feels like, you know, when you go to kind of like an amusement park where you have a big like hammer in your hand and you like hit it over your head, bring it down, hit a bell that's on the ground or hit something that's on the ground. And like this thing shoots up into the air and hits a bell at the top. Yep. Whatever that thing is.
Yep. She's
like, I see that happening. But instead, when you hit the bell, when like the thing hits the bell at the top, it then shoots into fireworks. And she's like, that happened about 6 weeks ago. And I was like, yeah, that's when it happened. And I mean, I know the exact moment, the exact situation. And she was like tying it to that time.
She knew too.
And so then in that session, she was like, okay, your root chakra is blocked. And this is the things you need to do for that. So then I now have spent, a year and a half working on that. And I actually now I'm just feeling ready to potentially see her again.
Wow. That's a lot from a psychic.
Yeah.
Over the phone.
One session.
One time.
Yes.
Might want to give her name and number at the end of the podcast.
Look it up. Yeah.
I have another question that I seem to remember you speaking about your throat chakra, also leading you to claim your own voice in your relationship.
Yes.
Do you want to talk a bit about that?
Yeah. I mean, I would say that opening my throat chakra, like the impact of that is massive on my life. And the other thing is that the throat chakra is also connected to like your sex and to my yoni. And so that also helped, like the connections were really vast and impactful because I was now able to ask for what I wanted more clearly in intimate and sexual situations.
Right. And let's be clear for the bravehearts that Janelle is not someone who's timid or doesn't have a voice or she is a confident, brave entrepreneur who's traveled around the world and she's done some big stuff. This is not like, oh, her voice just wasn't there. She's never stuck up for herself. This is not that story.
Right.
But just know that you can have a voice in some situations, a big voice in some situations, and a small voice in others.
Right.
This is where you brought your voice to life in an intimate and sexual situation.
part of it was, like just that not even knowing what I wanted to say. And then like, that's one part of it. And then once I figured out I knowing it, then to like actually bring voice to it was a whole other level. And yeah, it's like singing gave me practice of knowing of like, so when I was ready to ask for what I wanted, I had the like strength in my vocal cords to do it.
Crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's good stuff.
Yeah.
What's next?
Okay. Well, on to the last one, which is what I would say is like the extreme end of woo
Okay.
for me.
Okay.
This is the most extreme
end of woo. Super weird. Weird shit.
Weird shit. Okay. So I heard about Indian palm leaf readings, also known as Naadi, Naadi readings, from a friend who like was listening to a podcast. And this is a friend who's not, this is an old, good, dear friend. But she's not in this world of like,
this world
per se.
She's in another world.
But she's the one who told me about it for the first time. And I was like, that sounds really interesting. So what it is, it's this concept, or it's what it is 3,000 years ago, an evolved, elevated, conscious human called Maharishis in southern India wrote down the lives of souls living in the future on Indian palm leaves.
Okay, I got a visual. Super.
And like, so palm leaves,
like literal
palm leaves, written in, I believe it's in Tamil, which is a phonetic language, stacked in bundles of about 80 palm leaves, wrapped in a cord, and categorized by thumbprint.
Okay. I'm still with you.
And they're stored in quote unquote libraries around this particular area of India. But the library is just really like a room in someone's home. So the process of getting an Indian palm leaf reading involves, you give them your gender, and based on your gender, you give them either your left thumbprint or your right thumbprint.
Oh.
Not your name, not your age, nothing. It's just a thumbprint and your gender.
Okay.
And I went through the Indian Palm Leaf Reading Institute. They then, they say up to 2 months then to find your palm leaf, because they send your thumbprint off to India.
You kidding me?
No. Nope. And then someone on a bicycle bikes around the villages, going into the different homes that have palm leaves and look for a bundle that matches your thumbprint.
I just want to stop for a second. That like, you know how like we're best friends and everything, but I haven't heard this story yet. This is the first time I've heard it. So how great that I'm like, you should see
time.
You should see my face right now. Yeah, I'm like,
real time woo and wisdom happening live.
Are you
live from Proficient to Be Human?
Are you fucking kidding me? Okay, keep going. Keep going. You weird girl. Keep going.
Yeah. Okay, so then after a couple of, it was 6 weeks or something, or 7 weeks, then they found it. They said, okay, we found 2 bundles with your thumbprint. So now we can do a matching. And so the matching involves being on a Zoom call with a moderator who's someone who works for the Indian Palm Leaf Institute, and she lived in Amsterdam. And then with the translator and with the reader. So the reader is speaking in Tamil. The translator is translating that into English. The moderator is there to help with the accent and questions, and me. So we're all on a Zoom call. And the reader goes through every palm leaf until he finds yours. And the way that he finds yours is that he's asking you questions. So there are some questions. It's a phonetic language. And so there's certain like letters that sound the same. So you want to know, like you write down how many letters are in your name, how many letters are in your parents' names. What are your parents' names? What are the letters that your parents' names start with? And what are the letters that your parents' names end with? And when are you born? Do you want to know when you're born?
Okay.
And then they just start asking you questions. So, does your mom's name start with, and they give you like a group of consonants and you say yes or no. And if you say yes, then they ask you the next question. Do you have a brother? Yes or no? And then they ask you the next question. If you say no, then they go to the next leaf.
Okay.
If you say yes, they keep going. So the idea being that every time they say no, then you know it's not your leaf and they go to the next one. So they found 2 bundles for me. So we went through the whole first bundle and I was like, yes, 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 no. And then yes, 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 no. Yes, 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 no. And so then kept going
process
through.
of elimination.
Yes. So then we started with the next bundle. And then they started doing it. I was like, yes, 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 no, yes, yes. And so eventually they were like, they got there. And so what they figured, like what they say, so I know that it's mine, is they were like, okay, your mom's name is Phyllis. Your dad's name is John. You have 1 brother. He has 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. You are separated in this case, like not yet divorced. You have a stepson. You own a house. And like they go through like very specific information.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, and then I'm in my 50th running year, meaning like I had just turned 49. And so there's more.
I have so many questions. Like, okay. Did they know your last name?
No.
Okay, continue. So they knew all this stuff about you is really the summary for me. I'm
right.
like, okay, they knew all this correct stuff about you. Go on.
Yes. And so then they say, okay, so then that's the matching. So now they have found your leaf. Yay!
Ding, ding, ding.
Ding, ding, ding. And then it goes into the reading of your leaf.
Right.
So one of the parts, just one of the parts that's fascinating is that the leaf starts at the moment that you find it. Meaning I'm 49. So the leaf starts with Janelle is 49. Blah, 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 blah. It doesn't say, oh, Janelle was 30 and now she's 49. No, it's like they know when you're going to find the leaf.
Oh my gosh. I'm having this terrible, I feel like my mom. I feel like I'm just like, oh, are you joking? This cannot be true. Not that there's anything wrong with my mom, by the way, but like more of a logical mind.
Yeah, this is a massive suspension.
Huge suspension of disbelief.
Yeah.
And I'm also reminded as I'm listening, I just want to pause for a second. I got to take a breath. I want to remind bravehearts, and I'm reminding myself as I listen that many stories of origin are completely fucking crazy and sound crazy. We know the one about Jesus, and we've heard the one about many different religions, Jesus being the one I know the best. And if you didn't know it your whole life, it also sounds crazy. But because you've heard it so many times and you've seen it in pop culture and you've read about it and you talked about it in class, there's an acceptance of the belief where this is new. So I'm just reminding myself of that this feels hard to believe. And yet, in a sense, it's just another origin story of wisdom.
I wish the bravehearts could see your face right now.
I know, me too. Like, what a waste. Like, as I'm just like, what? Okay, keep going. So what's next?
Okay.
So we started at 49. That was the last thing you ended on. It
Yeah.
doesn't start when you're 30 or when you're born. It starts when you're 49 because they know when you're going to look for it.
Right. So mine started at 49, right?
Exactly.
The moderator found hers at 26.
Sure.
Like someone, and so
It
that's
varies.
when it starts. Yeah. And so then the reading kind of gives you an overview in a way. And this is now where I'm not going to go into like super specifics, of the knowledge that gets transmitted because I don't know it well enough. But essentially, they say, okay, here's where some of the challenges you are. Like if there was like karmic stuff that I needed to clear, they're kind of telling me that. They're breaking up my life into this part of your life is 90% supported, 10% unsupported, and it's unsupported in this way. And then this part of your life, so like, for example, I'm like talented, smarts, like this was all 90% supported. Then it was like relationships and finances. And that was 70%, 30%. And then there was another piece was like family, and that was 60%, 40%. And like one of the reasons, like the unsupported was like the unsupported part was like my mom had passed away. Supported part was that like I was in good relationship with my brother and my dad. An unsupported part of relationships is 30%. Was that although I had been in relationships, I wasn't in any stable relationships. I was like in the process of getting divorced.
Right.
I didn't have any children. These were things that I had like essentially blocks on my chart, or like, I don't know, that's not what they used, but like I had blocks that were resulting in.
And so far they're telling you things you already know.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. Yeah. So they're kind of explaining to like why. So I know these things and I'm surprised that they know these things.
For sure.
Kind of thing.
Yep.
And then they tell me like, oh, and this is how you are because like Mars is in your chart and Jupiter's in your chart. And so then they go into it because it's Vedic astrology.
Okay.
And then what they do, which I had never had done experience before, not that I had any of this experience before, but they go into basically a play-by-play of the rest of my life in 2-year increments until my death. And so one of the big, again, bravehearts, I wish you could see Andrea's eyes right now. So this is one of the things where a lot of people who hear about this are like interested and then not.
Don't want to know when I'm going to die.
I don't want to know when I'm going to die.
You knew this going in, I assume. And you decided.
Yeah.
You didn't tell me any of this. I'm like, what the fuck? How did I not know you were even contemplating this? How long did you think about this? This happened in Boston.
The reading took place in Boston.
That's what I thought.
But back to like, oh, wait, and then decide. I had first heard about it and then heard about it again and heard about it again. So I was like 4 months before I decided that I should even like try this.
Okay.
And then I decided to try it and then I did it and yeah.
Okay. So without going into details, at least not perhaps on air, how are you feeling about finding out the projection from the Indian leaf palm reading about your death?
Well, it turned out for me that it's been really affirming. And it actually instead of me like, oh my gosh, I'm going to die. I'll tell you, I'm not going to die tomorrow. And I'm not going to die in the next like 2 years.
I think you would have told me that.
Yeah. Maybe we shouldn't do a podcast. It's really not worth the investment. It's not a long-term return.
Yeah. It's true. You would have told me. You're like, dude, I'm going to die soon. Let's just quit.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Why it's not worth it. But I would say that, yeah. So ultimately, like, whether it's true or not, when they say I'm going to die, it has made me feel more relaxed of like, oh, but I'm going to be living right now. So like, I'm alive now.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm not fearing dying because of course I'm going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And instead I'm going to feel alive. I do feel more alive in a way.
Mm-hmm.
I will say this. I told another friend and she was like, oh my God, I want to live until like over 100. And I was like, oh, I don't. And what it told me actually aligns with, you were to ask me how long I want to live and when I want to die. Like it actually kind of aligns with what I think about myself. So I am curious for others who've had a palm leaf reading, and I only know a couple, is if what they find out is if it aligns with what they intuitively think. Like, so if my friend who wanted to live to 100, if she felt called to do this palm leaf reading, I wonder if she would be told if it would match. So I don't know.
It's pretty big.
Yeah. And then the part that was also surprising.
Is there more?
There's more. Was like the amount of detail that it went into in each of these 2-year increments. It talked about like when I was going to be ready for my next relationship. Talked about the work that I was going to be doing. Talked about the real estate that I should be buying or not be buying. It talked about my income versus my expenses for the next, in these 2-year blocks. It talked about the health of my dad. Talked about the health of my brother. And then it went on to the next 2 years. And then, it said, oh, and here's going to be potentially a lawsuit against you during this year. Oh, watch out driving a car during this time. And like really very specific, like extraordinarily detailed and not all positive and cheery.
Right.
But the point of hearing all of that is that they do give you homework at the end of the reading called pujas, where you can recite in, I guess, I don't know if they're all the same, but like I was given a specific set of mantras to recite on very specific days over the course of 5 months that will clear these negative energies and experiences that potentially could come through. And they also will clear the blocks that are in my system that were, when I said in the beginning, like, here's the parts of my life that are unsupported versus supported, that will clear those blocks so that it becomes supported. Yeah. There's another part that's a little bit more woo, but I think I'm going to leave that part.
I think that's all the time we have for today. No, I'm just kidding.
No, I get it. Yeah.
Wow. That is some big shit. That's
some big shit.
Some big woo.
Yeah. And I will say this. It's been massively impactful for me because.
Can you just to contain it a bit more, like what's one action or one thing that it has changed in your current life?
Yeah. So recently divorced. My finances are like completely in upheaval and different than they were 6 months ago or 9 months ago now. And I really was like, okay, I'm in debt now, but I'm going to like figure this out. And by second quarter, I'm going to like be in alignment. And I'm going to get my like finances back in order. And this is my plan. And when they said, oh, your expenses are going to be higher than your income for the next 2 years, it suddenly made me go, oh my gosh, like I am completely getting stressed out about an arbitrary deadline about finances that I've created on myself when I am a single woman. I'm not responsible for anybody else. So whatever debt I have, I'm not leaving it to anybody. That all the people I love, ex-partner, stepson, like brother, like everyone makes more money and has more money, a lot more money than I do. That I was really freaking out about the debt that I had because I had never been in debt before. And it was making me feel small and stressed.
And really panicked, right? Like you had to solve it immediately.
Yeah.
Like ASAP, like next quarter.
Right. Like, and something like, oh, like I'm now a divorced woman who's like really struggling, blah, blah, blah. And this reading, like it was like a complete 180-degree switch in my mentality where like literally within 24 hours, I felt like I was like breathing fine, big, like, oh yeah, I'm just going to school. Because what they actually said was that you can think of the next 2 years as like, this is an educational time for you. And I was like, oh, I went into debt to go to college for 4 years. And I didn't think twice about that.
Right.
And so now I switched my thinking to like, oh, the reason why I'm going into debt is because I'm like reinventing myself. It's going to take 2 years. I thought it was going to take 3 months. Nope. It's going to take 2 years. And now I just get to like relax and have fun and not worry about here's what society says, like you should, like your debt to income ratio should be. And instead be like, it's fine. I'm capable.
Amen, sister. You just said it. It's really true.
Yeah.
Like really good.
Yeah.
That's a huge truth to come through for you.
If I get nothing outside of that reading, that has changed my life.
Wow. So will you go back and get another one, or you just get one in your life? Is it, or do you go back? What's the deal?
They say if you're called to it, you can go back, but I think most people don't go back.
Mm-hmm.
But some people, especially I think if you were younger and you got your first reading, that you might want to go back.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm integrating. How about that? I'm contemplating and integrating. I've just had an experience by osmosis. So
yeah. So I think we're done.
Thank you for sharing all the flavors of woo.
Yeah.
Or just those few flavors of woo for now.
Right.
So do you have any resources you want to share, or homework for the Bravehearts?
Yeah. I the homework is, again, like this isn't a framework to follow. This is just like breadcrumbs to lead yourself to curiosity and see if anything resonates for you. So if any of the things resonated, you can get your human design, just look up humandesign.com or human design and get your chart read. Go to genekeys.com.
Right.
And these are 2 free resources, right? And the Indian Palm Leaf Reading Institute, you can look them up if you really want to go deep there. And then, of course, I have these individual people that I'm happy to share for those who, like, go ahead, write in. And if you've got a question or interested. But more than anything, I think the most important homework is that follow your own soul, your own heart, your own listening. Don't pay for anything because I've talked about it. Mm-hmm. Like, all these have free resources to do your own research to see, is there something else deeper for me here? This is
Janelle's truth. What's yours?
Exactly.
Very important idea. And don't overdo it either. You don't want to go get
You're not going to go all 5 all at once.
Yeah. Right? And then you're just not even know what to do with all that shit. Like, you go slow.
Right. Yeah. What I just described was over a 7-year period of time.
Great point. Mm-hmm. Yeah. I love that. And as your permission, go and seek. Go and see what you find. Remember too that Janelle and I are available for coaching. permissiontobehuman.live. Great place to check out. That's our website. And you can learn more about how we could help you find your truth.
And if you have any questions about anything I said, you're also welcome to call in or send an email, and I'll happily answer them.
Okay. Thanks for sharing, friend.
Thanks for listening with an open heart and open mind.
You betcha. Anytime.
Do you need permission to be human? You got it. Listen, subscribe, and review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. Learn more about us at permissiontobehuman.live.